Happy Friday, or it's Friday when I'm recording it, from the Whispering GM. My name is Taylor, and I've got a short one for you, just to prove I'm alive. Something I saw on the X recently, paid GMing. I don't know if I've spoken on it, so I figure I might as well. Paid GMing is not new. It's been around at least as long as I've been in the public hobby, that is, when I played it at a comic shop. But the whole time we talked about it, it's drawn some really visceral responses. There are some people who jump on it and ride that bandwagon, and then there are others who have this visceral distaste for it, and distaste for people who either sell their GMing services or who buy it and encourage the behavior. To be honest, I don't really stand in either camp. I don't hate it. I'm not disappointed with people who engage in it. If you paid me to run a game, I would totally run a game. But at the same time, I don't understand it. The concept is foreign to me. Not to delve too deeply into when I was your age, but when I first entered the hobby, there was a shortage of players, not a shortage of referees. The first campaign I ever ran was in the mid-90s. It ran for about 7 years, and I ran through probably 7 or 8 players, but never more than 3 at a time. I don't know if it was post-Satanic Panic or post-fad passing, but for the life of me, I could barely keep a group alive. There were very few people who were interested in the game, and when they moved away, it was hard to find a replacement. This trend would continue as I went into college, less that there were too few players, but too many players wanted to run their own games. Part of the problem there might have been that I was playing with the same folks at the comic shop who were running other games and they had their home campaigns, but what we used to do is there were 5 or 6 people pretty consistently, and each of us had our home campaign. So one of us would run for like 6 months, then the next one would run for about 6 months, and it would just kind of rotate around. And so you'd run short stints in the campaign and then essentially cycle characters. When I was a kid, you would have a stable. When I was in college, we tended to have the more traditional view, just because everyone was there every time, and you just ran your own character, and then each cycle you would change out for a new character, a new party, and it would advance the story of the world. And that was true for several different people. There were almost as many GMs as there were players, and so the concept of trying to get paid to do it, in both instances, there was no market. When I was a kid, if I tried to get people to pay for it, that would have been crazy, because I couldn't find people who were willing to play it for free with me when I was offering it as a service. And then in college, theoretically, there was $1 charge for the table at the comic shop, but that was more to, get people in the door and justify that we were there selling books and that kind of thing. So I would hardly count that as paid GMing. I will admit I was given candy, but I digress. In the home group that we played with, it would have been impossible just because there was such a glut of DMs that even though we technically had more players, why would they pay for it? They had so many different options. And we were all friends, so it kind of it would have defeated that friendship. And that kind of feeds into a sort of difference in the culture. When I was playing, I played with friends. And that's been true even into the digital era. Like if I have some actual plays on the channel, I haven't done one in a while, There were some actual plays that I was a part of a couple years ago. We were buddies, and it's difficult to charge a friend for a service. I mean, I understand if you're helping somebody out and like changing their oil, getting reimbursed for your expenditure. A better example might be I had a buddy do our mulching. He had a lawn business, and I did pay for it. And I said, "Wow, that's the cheapest mulching I've ever had." And he goes, "That's the good buddy price." So the moral story is, money can mess up friendships, and so when you play in a friend group, or when I do, the concept of exchanging currency is foreign. To that end, when you're doing a paid GM gig, the GM isn't a friend at that point. The players might be, but the GM is more a contractor, a service provider, and your relationship is necessarily different. And that's a position I've never found myself in. Lastly, I want to think about it from the perspective of a player. I get that there are certain games I'd like to play, but at the same time, when I was playing as a kid, either college type or elementary type, I didn't have money. The main reason that I got into the role-playing game area is because I could not afford to play other games. I have a little bit of Warhammer that I've built up over a very long time. I have a little bit of other like board games that I've built up over a very long time. But in general, my buddies and I were broke. And so even if we were able or interested to pay for a GM, I wouldn't have been able to afford it. It's just not something that would have made it into the budget. To clarify, I'm not hating, but I just don't understand where the paid GMing comes from. It's a cool idea to me that the hobby has gotten more expansive, that there's so many players that this has become a thing. It's a golden age of gaming. Not as much as it was a couple years ago, but still a golden age of gaming. You have access to so many different materials. You have easy, inexpensive access to so many different systems. And there's a glut of players to where you can essentially have your pick. That's a beautiful place to be. But it's unique to our current situation. And it's not what I'm used to. And it's something I'm still getting a hold of. Having given some thoughts to paid GMing practically, just in my own experience and why I haven't done it or commissioned it, the next thought is to engage it conceptually. There are certain elements of the game that are conducive to the friend group, but also certain elements of the game that I think would play out differently. And if you were considering hiring a paid GM or being a paid GM, you'd have to consider into consideration. First off, when you play with friends, you essentially know the boundaries that you are willing to stick to. And I've come on record before as saying Session Zero and Lines and Veils are bad, blah, blah, blah. But the main reason for that is I knew my players. And I want to have a good table. I want to have a fun table. I need to make sure as the referee that, one, I have the people at my table who are interested in the same thing that I am, and two, that I'm not putting stuff in front of them that is, patently offensive to them or, bad. So if I'm running a game with kids in it, I'm not going to put adult themes. If I'm running a game with someone who has, I don't want to say this because this is a family-friendly podcast, but if I have someone who's experienced real traumatic events, I'm not going to put those traumatic events in the game itself. Now, I'm not talking about I have an arachnophobic player, so I'm not going to use giant spiders. That's not trauma. They can get over themselves. What I'm talking about is like if I have a military friend who came back and isn't a big fan of firefights or loud sounds, I'm not going to ask him to play Delta Green with me. So there's a degree of separation there about whether it's appropriate or whether it's whether it's silly, but that that's the core of the thought is I'm going to treat my friends well. There's an argument that if you have your friends at the table, you're going to treat them better than they should to be super fair, the game master's girlfriend rule. But I tend to treat my friends a little worse than I treat strangers. That's how you know I love you. So kidding aside, the first thing you'd want to think about is how does playing with strangers affect your role as the game master or the player? But truthfully, that falls in the same way as if you're, getting a random group off of Roll20 or off of one of those others, like a Discord. One thing that is unique to the paid element is the aforementioned GM as a contractor. If I am giving you money, you are beholden to me. You owe me to provide a certain service. And you can say, okay, I'm going to run B2. I want to charge X dollars a head. I'm going to expect you to do B2. I'm going to expect you to do it well. There may be certain asks that I, as the customer, have that whether you as the service provider choose to accommodate them or not, the general rule in other service industries is you try to bend a little bit. Because think about it, if you tick off your customer base frequently enough, you're not going to have a customer base. And so there's always that piece nagging at the back of your mind. Should I kill this player character? Should I include this theme? Should I invest in these additional resources to make the experience better? The GM almost comes off as an employee in that sense, and it really changes the dynamic. Suddenly, while the referee is not supposed to be a adversary, so to speak, well, I have a whole episode on that. The GM is supposed to provide the adversary, but not be the adversary. Adversarial versus adversarial gaming. But when you're the employee, then you have to think about it. That changes the dynamic between how your players interact with you and how you treat them. It becomes very difficult to have that same vibe that you have in a friend-to-friend game. Talking about the should I kill this player character, that comes up too. Because as a newcomer to the online gaming world, I encountered people primarily in newer games that would have characters they wanted to play. They would have builds, they would have backstories, they would have arcs they wanted to take them through for development. You as the employee GM, how much of that are you going to provide? How much of that are you going to give them? And is that truly the expectation? If they have a group of players and module and characters, they may want to experience that using the characters they've come up with. And so now, are you under pressure to nerf it? Are you under pressure to treat them like your girlfriend because they are putting money into it? If I'm playing for like 6-7 sessions, and I've not done this, so you can tell me if this is dumb. This is more a one-shot deal. But if you're playing for any amount of time, and a lot of those old modules, they're not going to be a one-shot. Are you relegated to sort of like nerfing it or figuring out a way to put a railroad in the sand for them? That changes the way that you run the game, and that as a player, that would honestly be in the back of my mind. As a player, I would be nervous that a paid referee was either being nice to me so that he could earn my favor, or possibly the other alternative is like, are they running a level, fair game? Are they refereeing or experience orchestrating? And that would nag in the back of my head. So if you are hiring one, I don't know if that bothers you, but that may be something you want to discuss with the ref beforehand based on your expectations. And if you're refereeing, same story. It's like, is this something you have to deal with? Is this something that you have a plan to think about? Lastly, what happens when the campaign ends? If I hire someone to run B2 and we run B2, that's kind of a sandboxy event. And how long is that going to last? I don't know how many sessions I can put into it. Lost City. If I run someone through Lost City, how many sessions is that going to take? And that's going to be that's arguably a much more potential in terms of building out that sort of campaign. And but say you have a very definitive scale, you're running an adventure path, I guess. That has like a defined beginning and defined end. What happens when it ends? Do you rehire the same GM? How do you line up games as the GM? So do you line up another game to take the spot? I'm not sure how that would work. Do you reserve them for another module? That's something that you'd have to take into consideration as the GM, keeping your time afloat, or as the player, keep making sure you have continuity of the campaign. Or even if you want continuity of the campaign, how do you handle vacation? Like say I'm off, say somebody's out for a night. How does that work? What if the GM can't do it a night? Do you push it forward as scheduled? Do you change the financial ramifications? There's a lot more concerns that come up than you do with a friendly game in terms of what happens when the campaign ends. So there you have some thoughts from a rank amateur at the subject. Have you GM'd for money before? Have you paid for a GM before? And I mean that in more like the context of a home game, but at the same time, how would you compare that to a convention? How would you compare that to a league, which may have an entry fee? If you fall into any of those categories, if you have thoughts, if I am wrong and you need to tell me I'm wrong, comment, shoot me a speak pipe. The information is provided in the show notes as to how to contact me. I would love to hear about your experience because I am curious how that went. And what more shall I say? For time would fail me to tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, of David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, enforced justice, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the power of fire, escaped the edge of a sword, were made strong out of weakness, became mighty in war, put armies to flight. Women received back their dead by resurrection. Some were tortured, refusing to accept release, so that they might rise again to a better life. Others suffered mocking and flogging, and even chains and imprisonment. They were stoned, they were sawn in two, they were killed with the sword. They went about in the skins of sheep and goats, destitute, afflicted, mistreated, of whom the world was not worthy, wandering about in deserts and mountains, and in dens and caves of the earth. We have transitioned, if you hadn't figured it out, into the benediction part. So if this is not your cup of tea, you're welcome to skip to the end. But that's out of Hebrews 11. And I bring it up in part because while I do not claim to hold a candle to any of the names that come up in that passage, I've been through a little bit of a tribulation in recent vintage. In the last episode, I mentioned that God is our healer, and He is. But sometimes He will heal with a sign or a wonder, and then sometimes He will heal with a scalpel or a surgeon. And that's where I was these last month or two. I had hoped, I knew it was coming, I'd brought it up, some of my Discord knew about it in advance, but I had hoped that while taking a little time off of work to convalesce, I'd been able to put that time towards gaming. And I tried, but I just didn't have it in me to put the podcast out. I didn't have it in me to write an article. Now, I did get some reading done. I read through some of Donald Featherstone's Naval Wargaming. I read through Tony Bath's Ancients. That was a lot of fun because his Hyperborea game, it's just set in that perfect setting where y'all know that I love working. I now desperately want to run a Pelham and Peltist's game. I'd also spent some time watching some movies, just kind of letting that run while I dozed or otherwise just hung out in bed. Conan, Outlaw of Gore, Deathstalker, the classics. And hopefully I get some more articles out of that, because I want to share some of these movies with you, both as a warning or as a introduction. But so I've got a renewed love for the game. I've got a renewed love for the hobby, but I'm at the moment I'm focusing on getting better, and I appreciate your patience with me as I kind of roll through that. I won't bore you with the details, but to go with another Hebrews quote, I will stand firm, I will act like a man, I will stand strong in the faith, and I will do all that I do in love. And in this case, it's love for you guys and love for the game. Thank you for listening, and between now and when we get to talk again, I won't bother you with the health details, but I will be pressing you for the ones from the dungeon. Delve on. The Whispering GM podcast is an independent production under the Clericsware Ringmail, intended for educational and informative purposes, and released under the Totally Steal This license. Theme is Hooligans by Michael Ramirci, and sound effects are taken from Pixabay and Mixkit.co, used under their respective licenses. Anyone interested in contacting about the podcast is welcome to do so using the mechanisms described on the Clericsware Ringmail blog. Thank you for listening.